for Ukraine?
I hope that they decide to follow President Trump and his team's lead on this, because let's not forget, until President Trump was elected, there was no European leader even working toward peace. In fact, it was scuttled back in 2022 by the EU. And I think quietly in the background, some of these leaders may have been working against the efforts to reach a negotiated peace settlement, encouraging Ukraine and Zelensky to have unrealistic expectations of what this is going to look like.
In this segment, we're going to watch one of Donald Trump's loyal defenders, Carla Sands, get put on the spot. The conversation starts with her attempting to justify Trump's approach to the Russia-Ukraine war, but as the interview moves forward, it takes a turn she clearly isn't prepared for. Near the end, she's confronted directly about Trump's glaring contradictions on free speech. And that moment is where things really unravel. You'll definitely want to stay with it until that point, because that exchange is the most revealing part of the entire discussion. As always, we'll run through the clip from start to finish, and once it wraps up, I'll break down exactly what stood out to me. Let's jump in.
So the new White House national security strategy talks about wanting Ukraine to survive as a viable state. But is being asked to give up territory that Ukraine holds to Russia compatible with being a viable state? I mean, do you think Donald Trump would regard himself as the leader of a viable state if he was asked to give up parts of Texas to Mexico?
But you're actually conflating two things, and this is irrelevant. The fact is that Ukraine has no pathway to win this war. President Trump and his team are attempting to, I believe, de-escalate this war and get this process on a good glide path to find first a ceasefire and then an end to the hostilities. He wants to make sure that Ukraine, and you can read that right in the national security strategy. It's not a long read. It's available publicly. It's a public document. So we can see that President Trump wants Ukraine to remain a sovereign nation, as he hopes the rest of Europe and the UK will remain sovereign nations. At America First Policy Institute, we look at the America First agenda and we say, let's have our allies have a nation first agenda: secure borders, controlled immigration, protection of the rule of law, affordable and abundant energy, protection of your beautiful culture, freedom of speech, if that's part of your constitution, the fact that every nation should put their citizens first, a credible defense, make sure that you can be a viable country and secure. We need that in every one of our allies.
Now, a big theme for Donald Trump is free speech. And in this new White House document, it accuses Europe of censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition. But isn't that exactly what the Trump administration is doing in the United States? I'm thinking of how in September, President Trump celebrated ABC's suspension of the critic Jimmy Kimmel, his show. That was great news for America. And in July, Donald Trump filed that lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch over its reporting of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. So it's OK for President Trump to limit free speech in the US, but not OK for that to happen in Europe.
Not at all. So free speech is the foundation of our shared, I would say especially UK and US, our shared values. How we got free speech in the United States was from the UK, from hundreds of years ago. And so if we can maintain that, we will be able to have open societies. Once you allow one side to decide what is acceptable speech and not acceptable speech, you have a totalitarian government, because then you will have no free exchange of ideas. And it is happening. Just in Ireland, Enoch Burke, a teacher, because he wouldn't use a student's pronouns. Sorry, he's been jailed now, and he'll be in prison over Christmas.
Carla Sands, may I politely say that you're evading my question? And the question is that Donald Trump seems to be happy to go to courts to impose limits on free speech in your country and then lecture Europe about imposing limits on free speech over in Europe.
If he sues a network or entity, a newspaper, it's because they have done something that's broken the law. Otherwise, he wouldn't waste his time. He absolutely works to maintain his reputation. He doesn't allow himself to be taken advantage of by these networks. And most of them have been working lockstep with the leftist Democrats in the United States.
But if you believe in free speech, if you believe in that, I think it's the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, that is an unequivocal principle. You stand by that. You don't go to the courts when you don't like what people are saying.
Well, when it's unfair or illegal activity, you do go to the courts. But absolutely, I would say most people who are part of the circle of America First do believe absolutely in free speech. We're really worried about this Digital Services Act that the EU has passed, because I do believe that that is a kind of war against the United States. They are working to fine companies like X, Elon Musk, because he allows free speech. They're attempting to censor the speech in the United States of U.S. citizens. That is blatantly not okay. And it is, I believe, it's a gray zone act of war and must end.
Carla Sands, thank you for talking.
What makes this exchange so surreal is that it exposes a complete inversion of reality. Donald Trump and his allies have rebranded themselves as champions of free speech, while actively working to narrow it, intimidate it, and punish it when it threatens their power. That contradiction isn't accidental, it's strategic. Free speech, in their framing, is not a right that belongs to everyone. It's a shield for allies and a weapon against critics. Trump's pattern is consistent. When speech flatters him, he elevates it as patriotic. When speech challenges him, he frames it as dangerous, unfair, or illegal. That's why the lawsuits matter. These are not isolated legal disputes. They are part of a broader intimidation strategy. Even when cases are weak or destined to fail, the process itself becomes the punishment. Legal costs, stress, delays, and uncertainty are enough to deter future criticism. This tactic is well known in authoritarian systems and is often referred to as lawfare. The idea that Trump only sues when laws are broken collapses under basic scrutiny. Investigative reporting is not illegal simply because it's unflattering. Defamation law protects journalists precisely so powerful figures cannot silence scrutiny. Trump's allies know this, yet they continue to blur the distinction between falsehood and accountability. That confusion is intentional. It trains the audience to treat criticism as criminal. Trump's relationship with protest further dismantles the free speech myth. He supported aggressive crackdowns on demonstrations, endorsed militarized responses, and publicly encouraged harsh penalties for protesters he disagreed with. During his administration, peaceful protests were dispersed with force, reporters were injured, and federal agents operated without clear identification. These are not hallmarks of a leader committed to open discourse. They are indicators of someone deeply uncomfortable with dissent. The immigration angle makes the hypocrisy even more pronounced. The First Amendment does not disappear at the border. Visa holders, residents, and non-citizens within the United States still possess speech protections. Yet Trump's administration repeatedly blurred or ignored that reality, detaining and deporting individuals after political expression. That sends a chilling message. Speak carefully, or your status becomes leverage. That is the opposite of free speech culture. When confronted with this record, Trump's representatives consistently pivot to Europe, Ireland, the EU. This deflection serves one purpose: distraction. It avoids addressing the core question. The issue isn't whether Europe has speech debates. Every democracy does. The issue is whether Trump practices what he preaches. When the answer, based on evidence, is no. The digital services argument is another sleight of hand. Trump allies claim to oppose censorship while simultaneously demanding special treatment from private platforms. They frame moderation as tyranny only when it affects them. At the same time, Trump attempted to use executive power to punish platforms that did not amplify his voice. You cannot credibly argue for free markets and free speech while demanding state intervention to protect your ego. The presence of tech executives alongside Trump underscores the imbalance. These are not voluntary alliances based on shared principles. They are cautious engagements shaped by fear of retaliation. When billionaires appear restrained and compliant rather than outspoken, it signals that power is being exercised behind the scenes. Free speech does not thrive in environments where silence feels safer than honesty. Carla Sands' performance exemplifies the problem. She repeatedly reframes instead of responding. She asserts absolutes, then immediately qualifies them. She invokes free speech as sacred, then defends its restriction when convenient. This rhetorical whiplash isn't confusion, it's damage control. And it fails because the contradictions are too visible. Trump's praise of the First Amendment is hollow because it is not accompanied by restraint. True commitment to free speech means tolerating criticism, satire, and dissent without retaliation. Trump has done the opposite. He has encouraged boycotts, threatened regulation, attacked advertisers, and publicly targeted individuals by name. These actions create an atmosphere where speech is chilled, not protected. The comparison to authoritarian leadership styles is not hyperbole. In systems like Putin's Russia, speech is technically allowed but practically punished. The rules are vague. Enforcement is selective. Loyalty determines safety. Trump's approach mirrors that logic. He does not abolish free speech outright. He undermines it through pressure, stigma, and fear. What makes this especially dangerous is that it's wrapped in patriotic language. By invoking the Constitution while violating its spirit, Trump creates confusion among supporters. They are told they are defending freedom while cheering for its erosion. That cognitive dissonance is not accidental. It is the mechanism through which democratic norms are weakened. The international lecturing is perhaps the most galling aspect. Trump sends representatives abroad to scold allies about values he refuses to uphold at home. That erodes credibility. Democracies function on trust and consistency. When a leader demands standards from others that he does not apply to himself, the message becomes laughable at best and insulting at worst. The bottom line is simple. Free speech is not a slogan you deploy when it suits you. It is a principle you defend even when it's uncomfortable. Donald Trump has repeatedly demonstrated that he cannot do that. His actions show a preference for control over dialogue, loyalty over liberty, and power over principle. That is why the criticism is not partisan nitpicking. It is an assessment of conduct. And when you examine that conduct honestly, the conclusion is unavoidable. Donald Trump is not a defender of free speech. He is a selective beneficiary of it.